James Gunn versus Zack Snyder. Two visions, two DC universes. Like I said, I talked a little bit about this on Monday. We had somebody who commented and said, Slav, people need to just accept that there's going to be other filmmakers making DC stuff and they need to give them a chance. And I was like, you're absolutely right. Like, you're right. Like, the people just don't understand, or they don't want to accept that. They think everything is James Gunn. There is a really clear way to understand this, because James Gunn's DCU has a lot more range. See, James Gunn, he's built like this sandbox where filmmakers, writers, creators, artists, anybody can come into the DCU, pitch him a story, and there's a damn good chance that it's going to fit within that. They may need to tinker a little bit so it fits in line with the story that he's making, but it's such a wide open sandbox. It's such a wide open area, and just all of the toys are available to be played with. And that's what James Gunn has done. And the beauty of that is it's not all him. Like, sure, he's going to sit there and say, well, we're trying to get from point A to point B.
Yep.
Now, does it fit in there? Does this story fit in there? How's the script? How's the story? Is it a great story? Is it a strong story? Okay, does it fit in there? Can we make it fit? Okay, perfect.
Yep.
We can move forward with it. That's the way that James Gunn wants to approach this stuff.
That's his job.
Zack Snyder, and I say built, but I understand. Zack Snyder did not necessarily build anything. Zack Snyder came in, and there was already a script sitting on his desk for Man of Steel. Yep. And they were like, here's a script, here's Man of Steel. He then built off of that script. He built the world for Superman. Mm-hmm. After that, he then had this brilliant idea for the sequel that Bruce Wayne, if Bruce Wayne Batman was in the universe, how would he handle a super being like Superman? Okay? And he then built off of that. Made Batman v Superman and built off of that, and it just built the next movie after that. But because Warner Brothers wanted to expand and get so much larger and compete with Marvel, they were like, well, since Zack Snyder's here kind of establishing things, and why don't you help out in helping us build everything else? So he did. Like, he sat down and with Jeff Johns and some other people, Ben Affleck and some other David Ayer and some other Patty Jenkins, they sat down and they plotted out Wonder Woman, Suicide Squad, this and that, some ideas. But it was still very connected to what he was making. It still all had to lead back to his ending. It all had to connect to what he was doing. There wasn't a sandbox that they could really play in. It was more of a, well, here's Wonder Woman, you have to use her. Here's Batman, you have to use him. Here's Cyborg, you have to use him. Here's the Flash, you have to use him. Like, the creators, the artists didn't come in and get to just say, oh, I'd love to do this, I'd love to do this, I'd love to do this. Like, they didn't get to pick and choose. They were just given, like, here you go, here you go, here you go, here you go. So that's kind of what the problem was, and the difference was there. Gunn, he's created this universe that's kind of a multi-genre machine. Superman isn't Batman. Let's not forget that. Superman is not Batman. Zack Snyder kind of made Superman Batman in a way. While I love what he did with Superman, I get some people look at him and say, wow, why did they make him so dark and brooding like Batman? Swamp Thing isn't Booster Gold. Supergirl isn't like Creature Commandos. James Gunn understands that. So James Gunn, while he made this multi-genre thing, he did that for a reason. Because he knows that filmmakers and writers are going to come in and they're going to say, well, I want my Supergirl to feel like Supergirl. I want Creature Commandos to feel like this. I'm going to want Booster Gold to feel like this. I want Superman to feel like this, Batman to feel like this. And you're going to be able to have those characters and the films feel like they should feel. Whereas if you go take a look at what Zack Snyder was doing, every one of his movies and things connected to it, whether it was Wonder Woman, whether it was not the Flash, but Wonder Woman, Suicide Squad, and things like that, it all felt like a Zack Snyder movie. Everything had that same aesthetic, that same tone, that same, it just felt dark and dire. And, is that what we wanted? Sure, some people did, but it felt so secluded. So that's kind of the difference between the two. Because Zack Snyder had a very specific vision, and he wanted to execute it that way. He had an aesthetic, he had darker palettes that were operatic and melodrama. It was a myth of gods approach. It's powerful, but it's also limiting. Gunn's approach better reflects what comics actually are. Let's not forget that comics are not one flavor. They're an entire menu of strange, bold, and colorful, terrifying, goofy, tragic, epic, romantic, heroic, and downright bizarre. And sometimes all of that is in one single run of a comic. And you know what? Gunn gets that. Horror makes sense for Clayface. Whimsy and wonder define Superman. Comedy and absurdity power Creature Commandos. Grit and detective energy will anchor Batman. Adult, unhinged chaos thrives with Peacemaker. Each story gets the treatment it deserves, not the treatment the last movie forced it into. And that's the difference. Snyder translated DC mythology into one artistic voice, which can work for a spurt or a small secluded run. Gunn is translating DC mythology into every voice comics have ever used. James Gunn understands how comic books work, not as a single story, but as a galaxy of stories. His universe isn't just a reboot. It's a re-embracing of the medium versatility. One that unlocks the full spectrum of what DC can be, not just one corner of it. Snyder made strong, bold films, but Gunn is building a universe where every kind of filmmaker, and most importantly, fan, can thrive. And that is the difference. And that is why I always say that the DCU has a brighter future than the DCEU ever did. That's not to say that I wasn't excited for what the DCEU was going to bring, because I was excited for the story. I did like the story, and it was very fun. Like, it was very close to an ending. Like, it was very short. It was a short-lived story. But the DCU, there's so much to it that could just go on and on and on. And that is why it's so much brighter. But what do you think?